Hello and welcome to the Surplus Geek Podcast. I'm Jake, and today I am joined by Gage from G.I. Jones. All right. So, we could not good at this. We're gonna start this off by just talking about who you are, because you don't have the largest Instagram, but I think you should. So if you're not following him, go follow him. But anyways, who are you?
Appreciate that. Me, well, other than my name, I am the GI Jones. I guess I can really just get into kind of the background, where I'm from and what I do. So, from East Tennessee, 25 years old. Um, my day job is I work at commercial sales at a place called Tenier Industries. We actually make cold weather uniforms and sleeping bags for the military and also
Oh, that's
commercial
cool.
too. Yeah. So we make the extended cold weather clothing system. We make
Oh,
the leather, the layer 5, 6, and 7 uh, uniforms, and also like cold weather sleeping bags. And besides that, I'm also a volunteer firefighter. I've been in the fire service for 7 years now, so that's something I also do. And then the big thing, and probably the reason why I'm here, is my primary hobby, which has to do with military reenacting and collecting. Um, with big draw, I guess, my Instagram account, the GI Jones, which I started a few years ago, about 3 years ago. So how this thing came along was, or my interest, I guess. Well, we'll go back that far.
yeah.
So it started with watching war movies with my dad. He was really big into that stuff, watching like Kelly's Heroes
Oh,
and
yeah.
the Dirty Dozen. The
The
old school,
classics.
yeah, the classic war flicks, right?
I feel
That's
that.
where
Yep.
it started. Yeah, and then as I got older, started getting to the more recent movies, like my favorites, probably like Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers. Those, and that's what kind of drew me into the European theater of operations in World War II. Like that's my primary interest is World War II and in the European theaters. So that's kind of what has cemented that in my mind. And so for a while, I'd collect stuff. Being a kid, you get your M1 helmet and some web gear and stuff to run around and play, that kind of thing. I did that with my brothers, and then for a while, I just went on the back burner. Growing up, living your life and all that thing, and then what seriously got me into it, doing it seriously, other than casually, was at an event. I saw a World War II reenactment group that was local to my area, and I had no idea these guys existed. It's the 501st group, which is based out of East Tennessee, the Knoxville area. Which we have guys from all over the surrounding states, like Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas, Kentucky, that sort of thing. But mostly everybody's from East or West, well, just Tennessee in general. So I approached these guys. I was interested in joining the unit. My application, filled it out. Next thing I know, uh, this is where this whole wormhole began. So I became a member of this unit, and first, they give me a list of gear to acquire. Uniform gear, weapons, that kind of thing. So some of this stuff I already had just through just randomly collecting. I would just get stuff here, there, just whatever caught my eye that was interesting. So that's where that started, and then it's just like a bug that just bit me. Like as soon as I started learning about these things, I just wanted to learn more, and
Oh, yeah.
and also purchasing gear. Once you start, you don't stop. You just keep collecting because you're like, I got this, but I need this. And it's always something new. You always see something else you need. And I find myself doing that a lot, especially if I choose to do like a particular impression or something. I'm like, I already have most of this stuff. It's usually I have the majority of the things that I need. It's just like this one thing I don't have that I need. So it's like a bug, really. So
Oh, yeah. That's for sure,
going,
though.
yeah. So going on from there, try not to get too long winded here, but
Now you're good.
so I finally throw my first impression, my first kit together for my unit. They approve it and everything, and so I'm feeling pretty good about it. Around that time, it'd been a couple months, and I thought, well, you know what? I have enough uniform and gear thrown together. Well, just for the heck of it, I just made another Instagram account because I already have a private Instagram. And so I thought, well, what if I just made a public one, just posting this just for the heck of it? I wasn't aware of how big of a community there was on Instagram as far as living history and reenacting or just military in general related things on there. I wasn't really aware of it until I made an account. So starting that, I posted my first impressions. Obviously, not so good, 2, 3 years on from, you know, before now, but I can say they've improved. But through doing that, I've met a lot of people, a lot of interesting, good people. That even though this a lot of this stuff is just a hobby, people take it very seriously and they're very dedicated to it. And a lot of people they want to do things right. And so I strive to be somebody like that. Not about the likes and the followers and that kind of thing, but I try to aim to do something right and respectfully as I can. So, and that's kind of where I've got to now, slowly just building up a following. And I've met, like I said before, I've met a lot of nice people along the way. And there's people that's really helped me out with things. So, I can kind of say that's a brief rundown of where I've started to as where I'm at now. So,
Yeah, and I will say, yes, I agree. Your bank account starts to get depleted real quick when you start to buy stuff. Because that's what happens. Is I don't, you know, I'm not gonna say anything because I'll get in trouble. But you start you need to continue to just to have it. If you have this, you need that, and then that comes with this, and then it just comes down the line. But when it comes to the Instagram thing, I think that's why your Instagram is so good, even though, like again, like you said, you don't have all the likes and all that stuff, although you should. Um, is that you're just genuine. You're just going out there and making good content and you're just putting up there. The problem with Instagram right now is that it's the algorithm for Instagram is not pushing photography. So anyone that
yeah,
does photography focus is just getting completely, you know,
thrown under. Yeah.
yeah. So I think if that wasn't happening, if this was Instagram of 3 or 4 years ago, you'd be blowing up because that's how it was back in the day with Instagram, and I miss that as well. But
And I thought the whole point of Instagram is it's supposed to be photography focused. That's the whole point of it. And me personally, um, I'm interested in photography in general. Not just doing this stuff, but just in general, I'm interested in photography. So that's one of the reasons I brought what I have to Instagram. So
yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, that was the point of, and then a certain program called TikTok came along and just completely threw
yeah,
everything.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel you on that because I started off just doing the things that I did, and I've now had to realize that now I got to do reels and I got to do all this stuff that I'm like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm having a hard enough
Right.
time making videos.
Right, just to get you right, just to put yourself out there enough, like to expose yourself to everything you can.
Yeah, and it is what it is. I don't really care that much. I talked about Instagram a lot in the last episode, so I'm not going to go into too much here. But um, but yeah, I'm trying to process information here. So totally same thing for me with the whole watching movies and stuff. I grew up in the same exact movies. Obviously, Battle of the Bulge was the one of the most historically inaccurate movies. But man, is it
Horrible.
fantastic! It's such a
Horrible.
good movie though because you got people like Henry Fonda, who I'm a huge Henry Fonda fan. Just the A-list actors in that film is just it's so good, but it's so bad at the same time.
One of the movies I've watched recently that I hadn't went back and seen in a while was Battleground 1949. I think that's what it's called. I might have butchered the name there, but it's the movie about the 327th Glider Infantry during the Battle of the Bulge,
Mm.
and it's a film that was made shortly after World War II. And you take in consideration how hokey Hollywood was back then. Looking from a perspective now, trying to pick apart how accurate this thing is. And like we were talking earlier about entertainment value as far as those things go, I find myself a lot now like really nitpicking movies on
Oh yeah.
historical accuracy. Like I've turned into one of those guys, like a stickler for historical accuracy. If I'm watching a movie, somebody's watching it with me, I won't let them enjoy the movie. I'll just point it out, not just with war films, but like period films in general. Because
Yeah.
outside of that, I'm also interested in just history in general. So like I can sit there and I'll just pick things out. I'm like, this is wrong. This is wrong. They wouldn't have that. They wouldn't have this. So in a way, I kind of ruin it for myself instead of just like, all right, it's just a movie, just enjoy it. But if you see something, you know it's wrong. You can't get it out of your mind. So
Yeah,
it's
and
just one of
I
those
feel
things.
that it's tough. I actually try to reprogram my brain because I do the same thing, and I'm like, oh man, I gotta because there's certain movies out there where like you'll see people like the YouTube videos on them, and they're like it's the worst movie ever. Midway is a good example of that. The new Midway, the 2019 release, I think it was 2019.
I have
Um,
not seen that.
oh, it's actually a really good movie, and it's a lot of it's CGI, but it's a really I'm a big CGI guy, so like I dabble in that world and it's
So
good
like
CGI. So
the the like practical versus CGI effects. I mean, it depends if you can do it right.
yes, yeah.
If it looks believable enough, then I'm okay with it. Me for the most part, like I like seeing like practical stuff, like
Oh yes.
practical effects. That's the thing that I've always been into. It takes a lot of work to do that. So, and then for production and stuff, it comes down to your a bottom dollar is what it comes to. What's practical to do and what's not. So especially nowadays.
Well, I mean, even just like you look at like Kelly's Heroes Save Private Ryan. They take a T-34, mock it up to look like a tiger. It's not perfect, but it works and
Believable enough.
it's believable. And then you look at a movie like Fury, where I don't know what your opinions are on Fury, but I'm not a really big fan of that movie personally because I feel
Uh,
like it missed an opportunity to really show some good tank combat instead of just having Tiger in the open, you know.
yeah, as far as the accuracy for the pretty hokey. It was cool seeing like all the stuff on screen.
Yeah.
Seeing an actual tiger on screen as far as that goes, like seeing the sets and costumes and vehicles and stuff. They brought in for that. It's cool to look at, but as far as
I
like
mean,
the tiger scene for example, it's pretty
yeah.
hokey.
It's pretty and I just that movie was good, but it was, like, bad at the same time. I don't like the whole, "Oh, we're gonna introduce, like, a love story," and then immediately spoiler alert, by the
Just
way, she dies. And you're like,
right.
"Well, that was fun."
Yeah.
I don't know.
You go through a whole thing, love story, and then like next scene, artillery hits, and then she's dead. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
and
what
you're
was
like,
the
"Oh,
point of that?
alright." Yeah. I was,
The
like,
point of
very disappointed.
the whole point was for the new guy to get some. Like that was it. Like that's all that got across.
They had to put some shell shock into him fast, and that's how they were gonna do it. That and the guy lit on fire shooting himself was a little over the top for me too, but
Yeah, that was
not
like
saying that that wouldn't happen, but I'm pretty sure once you get to that level of being covered in flames, I feel like you're
you're done.
losing abilities to do things.
Feel anything? Yeah. Your nerve endings get burnt off. You're done
Yeah.
anyway. So
I mean, if one of them would have shot him, I would have been more fine with that because if I'm on fire and I'm gonna die, someone and there's nothing you can do about it, put a bullet in me.
I,
I
I
don't want
think
to deal with
the
that.
I think the part that bothered me the most was probably the end of that movie. Like the last stand, against the whole battalion of Germans. It's like I don't think I've ever heard of something remotely close to that, like happening. That's
It's also a
that's
waste.
remotely believable. Yeah,
That's a full tank crew. Just abandon the Sherman and just
just leave.
plug the tube or whatever you gotta do. Put it put an incendiary,
Yeah,
whatever you
disable it.
got.
Yeah, right,
And then
right.
just
Just knock it
retreat, get a
down.
new Sherman, as long as we didn't have plenty of them.
Right.
That was
Not
something
like
that
we
I
didn't
was
make
like,
like 50,000 of them.
yeah, and we rebuilt a bunch of them in the field, so it's just like one of those things where it's like, I would've just been like, "Alright, this tank's done, move back, get a new one." It's just
Right. Is it really? Yeah, it comes to a point. It's like, is it really worth this?
because a
Is
trained
it really
crew
worth it?
is way more, valuable than a tank. I mean, I know some people don't realize that, but and a crewman in World War II had a better survivability than, say, infantry or most other, especially bombers, for instance, but
And the way in media, it's not really portrayed that way, because it's all you always have the stereotype, the trope of Shermans being death traps, for this particular example, nothing but a coffin, basically, tin coffin or Tommy Cooker, whatever other nicknames people would call him. So, and also, if you want to go down that rabbit hole with the 75 versus 76
oh, man,
millimeter,
yeah.
main guns. The effectiveness. You know, you could talk about that all day long.
It's funny too because whenever that conversation comes up and someone tries to argue that like the U.S. made a mistake by not going with the 76, I always just bring up that tank commanders right before D-Day said no to the 76. We want to keep the 75 because we already know it. So it's
Right.
like,
Yeah, their crews were already trained on. That's what they were familiar with. They did have the 76s, but they sat in England
mm-hmm.
for some time after D-Day.
And
Anyway.
then they realize, okay, maybe we do need them. But it's funny. There's a study. The Chieftain talks about it, and I'm a big fan of Chieftain. But there's a study that he brought up on one of his things, and it was talking about like two. I think it was an M10, two M10s taking on some a Panzer III and a Panzer IV, I think. And they fired only like 10 AP shots. The rest of it was like white phosphorus and HE, and they fired like 56 HE rounds because they would just burn out. They would just hit them with white phosphorus and then HE, and then just
Yeah.
concuss them out. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's like video
Versus
games.
like what people believe versus the facts. It's a whole different ballpark.
Yeah.
People at the end of the day, people they're going to believe what they believe, but
Yeah, definitely.
it's
For sure. Yeah, and coming from someone who I never deployed, but coming from someone who did serve a little bit, I guess. Um, it's the same thing with like being a weekend warrior, being a National Guardsman. It's people have this idea of what it is, and anyone that's listening, it's not 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. They are lying to you. Uh, sometimes it's 3 days, sometimes it's 4 day drill. A weekend can be anything. A weekend can be a week. Um,
yeah. Yeah,
and
I've got a buddy. He's from here. He's actually in law enforcement here, the local sheriff's department. But he's also in the guard too. He's with the MP outfit. So
yeah, it's
yeah,
and that's not to say people shouldn't join the National Guard. I think the National Guard's fantastic. I think it's got a lot of opportunities. I know a lot of people who've made the most of it. You just, as my dad always said, it's the effort that you put in is what you get out. So it's if you don't put a lot of effort into it, you're not going to get much out of it. And if you want to just do your 2, 4, 6, whatever contract you want to do, just do it, and then just get out and stuff. But uh, hopefully I can have some people on that were in the National Guard with me. I'd like to have that. This is a reminder to those people if they're listening to come on.
yeah, that's a hint.
Yeah,
That's a hint.
that's a big hint. Some of them have agreed to and have not showed up. But anyway, so we'll move back to you. So you're doing the reenacting, which is awesome. It's something I always looked into. I always wanted to do. I just don't have the time for it, unfortunately. But um, time or energy or money or anything. Um, but you did the reenacting. You do. I mean, you cover pretty much. I want to say you cover from like World War II and on your Instagram all the way up to what do we say, like the 80s or maybe early 90s, somewhere in that
90s,
ballpark.
and that's like my exact goal. It's weird. My primary focus is World War II. That's one thing I've always been interested in. But after that is Cold War.
Yep.
46 to 91. I like you were just saying, I dabble in a lot of impressions. That kind of cover the span of that almost 50 years, from the early days of the Cold War till the end. So starting out from guys wearing M43s to BDUs. So and that's one thing that really interested me is all the different changes that happened over that span. How the military, in my particular case, what I'm interested in the Army, how the Army evolved from the end of World War II till the end of the Cold War. It's very interesting to see in the uniforms and gear and weapons, and you could you could go in a lot of it's a rabbit hole.
Oh
I mean,
yeah, for sure.
that's the best way I can put it. It's a rabbit hole. You could pick one impression, and you could go on forever. You get all the stuff you wanted for an impression, still not have everything. Like
Oh yeah.
I for the most part, I just cover basics. A basic representation. I'm not going to say it's always. I strive for accuracy the best I can, but you also have like practical limits, and one of those things comes down to money, obviously,
Of course.
but or things you just can't find. That, for example, a while back I was building on my Korean War impression, and it's almost next to impossible to find a M48 fishtail parka. You
Yep.
just cannot find these things, and if you do, it's
Expensive.
I'm 6 foot. 175 pounds. So I'm like a tall, lanky guy. Ones I find like on eBay, small for
Yeah,
like
you get like a
$300-400.
small
Yeah, it's
short
like
thing going on. Yeah, I know.
yeah, it's like so I can't 100% accurately do it because I don't have that item and I don't have anything to substitute it with. So it does have its limitations. So for the most part, I just try to stick basic. So basic representation to give somebody an idea of what an infantryman or rifleman, or whatever impression it is, an idea of what this person would have looked like, to give somebody a sense of time and place.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And I think you do a good job
that
at it. Yeah.
yeah, so that's what I aim for, and it's just become an obsession for me. Like just from World War II on, and I just find it very interesting. Yeah, so it's been a lot of fun, and not just acquiring items, but doing the research involved. Like I'll sit and look at pictures after pictures. I'll look at them again, and I can look at the same picture 30 times and still see something new
Yep.
every single time. And so when it comes to putting an impression together, it comes down to the details, and that's the thing I like to focus on. So it's very interesting. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, it kind of becomes an addiction almost because you can't stop. It just
You're never
um
finished.
and it's funny that you bring up like the evolution and stuff because I think I've always wanted to do something on the evolution of I guess specifically the army too because I kind of focus on the army as well. But um, nothing against the Marines, but there's enough people doing Marine content out there.
Yeah.
But
Somebody.
it's funny because you look at like field jackets. Field jackets basically stay
Oh man,
kind of the same
same.
almost all the way up to the 2000s when they stopped
That's
doing it.
if there's a particular item I'm obsessed with, it's field jackets. I love field jackets. I've got my M43. I just recently got an M1950 field jacket
Ooh,
that
yeah.
fits me. Yes, $60 on Facebook
Ooh,
Marketplace. I snagged that thing. Awesome. I have an M65, in the OG, the green, olive green. I've got a Woodland,
I need a
the
Woodland one at some
M65
point.
on Woodland.
Yep.
That one's a Marine marked one. It's got the EGA stamp
Oh,
on the
okay, that's
breast
cool.
pocket. Yeah, and that one my father gave me because along with the war movies and stuff, going back to that, my dad also collected militaria, for practical purposes, not as in he was interested in it, but it served a practical purpose because he was an outdoors guy, camping, hiking, that
Okay,
kind of
yeah.
thing. Because actually, over here in this corner, I have his Alice pack that he gave me. It's an '86 dated medium Alice pack, and this thing's like brand new. And he got out of the whole outdoor stuff, so he offloaded some of that stuff onto me, and that goes back to the '65 field jacket too. So I have a tangible connection to that stuff. So that's another way that it got me interested in collecting this stuff because I saw this like, man, this is a cool backpack, and then you look into it and you're like, man, this has got a lot of history behind it and stuff. So it in a way that's how it also relates to my military collecting obsession, I guess you could say.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's again, it's pretty much the same for me. It just my dad served and he passed on the stuff that he kept to me and stuff and I still have some of that stuff. You know, although he wouldn't let me keep his field uniform, his dress uniform, so I don't have that. I'll have to wrangle that from him at some point. But because he had the old, the greens and stuff, that I'm not really a big fan of them personally, but I like the new service uniform the Army's getting, the old school, going back to the pinks and green style, and
The World War II style.
yeah,
Yeah, I think they used what was the modern greens was like 54 to 2014, something like
something like
that.
that, yeah. And then we were
Yeah,
forced to use the ASUs for a while there, the blue, which the ASUs are
yeah.
all right. They're just kind of a pain. They're just kind of boring. They never really looked
See, I,
fantastic.
I read an article about that a while back. It was discussing like there was a lot of people that were polled about it, and they just didn't feel like it gave them an army identity. They
Yeah.
felt too compared to like the Air Force or something like that. Like it just didn't feel like it just didn't feel army enough. I guess is the best way for me to put it. Like where using that particular uniform, like
Yeah.
you said, just boring.
And couple that with the beret, which I've said it multiple times now. I don't like the beret. I'm just not a fan of the beret. I think the beret is fantastic for like the Rangers, for Green Berets, and for the airborne. But the black beret is just for everyone. No one knows how to form their beret, so it always looks bad. And it just, I don't know, it's just one of those things where it's like it's supposed to be
It's
uniformity,
a
and it doesn't fit that.
right, right, and from what I've also read, they implemented that to, I guess, in a way to make everybody feel included, because the
Yes.
beret was reserved for like elite forces,
Yep.
before that. So
That
that's
was
a
that was it. Yeah, that was the reason. Yeah, which is weird when you think about it. Um, but yeah,
when
oh, sorry, you go. Yeah,
everybody's special, nobody's special.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, they still have all the training and stuff, so they're still cooler than us.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
they get colored berets. That's where Rangers get the
That's
tan
where,
beret, and
yeah,
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 you know who you're dealing with when you see the color of the beret. And you're like, oh, okay, this guy's a total BA. I'm gonna
yeah,
walk this direction because I'm not cool enough. Um, yeah, and I will say it was boring. We went to military balls and stuff, and it just I can't imagine. I'm mad that I'm out. I'm glad that I'm out, but I'm mad that I'm out because I can't imagine what the balls look like when once everyone has pinks and greens, or whatever we're calling them right now.
right.
It's gonna look awesome. It's just gonna be a bunch of dapper dudes and ladies walking around, just like
And it's going thrown back to the World War II, time period. Our greatest generation era. A lot of people look back at that with nostalgia. I mean, that can also be a good and bad thing.
yeah, of course,
I
yeah,
I don't want to get into that, but that could be a good or bad thing, for obvious reasons. But
yeah. I know
I find myself,
I was gonna say I was gonna say that's the only thing that kind of sucks about history is that there's the good side of it and then there's the bad side of it, and it's hard to get away from that bad side.
it is, but I also like. I mean, you have to acknowledge it too. Obviously,
Hmm.
I'm sure there's people out there that just cut out all the bad stuff. Here's the good stuff. But I mean, if it's history, you have to have the good and bad. I mean,
Yeah.
it happened, so it's all there. So I mean, the best thing you can do is acknowledge, yes, that's there. It happened. So
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think I think people like you said, people think back on it and they're like you have people like, "Oh, I'd love to live in the 50s." And I'm over here like, "Nah, I like living in the modern era because medicine and technology and
modern medicine.
yeah, because
I
back
mean,
then they were like, just eat more steak and
smoke a cigarette, you're fine.
smoke a cigarette, yeah. Smoke your
Yeah,
cigarette with
you're
a
good.
asbestos filter on it. You'll be good. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, you're good, man. Don't worry about getting mesothelioma or lung cancer or
You don't have to
whatever
worry
else,
about
man.
that for another 30 years.
Yeah, you're fine.
But yeah, we've really gotten off topic, but that's fine because that's the point of this podcast, pretty much. Um, but yeah, it's funny because again, going back to the uniforms and stuff, because yeah, it's all the same thing. How we've kind of gone back on the dress uniforms and how the you know I always think it's funny post Vietnam we go back to OG 107s. I mean, we never really transitioned away from them outside of Vietnam, but all units went back to OG 107s and eventually 507s, sort of. And then you get
Right.
that old school style uniform that's not so because I personally I like the look of the OG 107, but the jungle uniform pattern I think is a lot more practical for
Cut.
combat.
And that's why it was implemented and developed, for Vietnam. It's
Yeah.
a tropical, it's purpose made for that environment. When guys, um, for example, my girlfriend, her grandfather, he was a combat engineer in the 299th Combat Engineer Battalion, and he was one of his unit was one of the first to deploy in Vietnam in 1965, and he went in wearing the OG 107s, leather
Yep.
boots, the well, it might either been the M48 or the McNamara style boots. I don't know for sure, but I know they were both floating around that time. But went in with that, and I remember him telling me stories of just how ungodly hot it was there, and that uniform as a general purpose, temperate work uniform, yeah, it's great. But you
Yeah.
get in an environment like that, I mean, as far as I can remember, they were poplin weave, I believe.
Yeah, I
The
think
OG
so. Yeah.
107s were, so it was a thicker weave, so they didn't breathe well, and with the leather boots getting exposed to tropic environments, they just fall apart, right? So and anybody that knows anything about that, that's kind of where they were wanting to phase those out for having a purpose uniform for that environment. And it goes, you can go back to any conflict. you have to you go in starting with what you have, and then slowly throughout changes they implemented to where things are suited for that environment. Like Korea, for example, cold weather uniforms for Korea, they hadn't really been touched on since World War II. And
Yeah.
through the intense and terrible cold winters through Korea, they came up with a system, the M51, 1951 series. There's a lot of stuff, trousers, jackets, shirts, that whole thing. That's a rabbit hole. But just for Korea, for example, the revolutionized or basically redone our cold weather uniforms. How that's implemented, and back to Vietnam, that's the same thing with the tropical uniforms. So try not to ramble on here. I
No, that's
apologize,
fine.
but
You're good. You're good. Don't worry about it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was gonna,
try not to ramble here.
well, I was gonna
I get a
say,
little
I was gonna say, you're fine with rambling. I was gonna say that I think it's funny we're talking about this, but you work at a facility that makes the modern cold weather gear, and that
in that
completely threw the old system out to the
out of
wayside.
right. So right now we're making the third generation of the EC. Let's see. It's hard for me to remember this acronym. So it's
ECWS or
extend.
ECWCS?
Yes, ECWCS. Yeah. So right now we're currently making which also we have this stuff for sale commercially. I
Yeah, of
just want to
course.
shameless plug. I just want to
And by the
volunteer
way,
that.
the ECWCS, it's a fantastic system. Waffle tops are amazing. The wet weather tops are amazing. I mean, that's really all you need: wet weather tops and waffle tops, and you're pretty much
Yeah.
warm and not wet.
So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. So from Korea, we used that cold weather system until I believe it was either the 80s or 90s when the first generation of the extended cold weather system was implemented. Like you said, it just completely threw all the old school stuff out the window, just threw it all out. So we just started from scratch again to where you have a 7 layer system going from your underwear, your
Yep.
base layer to the layer 7, which is like the big puffy Arctic stuff,
Oh yeah, the
static,
marshmallow suit.
static stuff. Yeah, the marshmallow suit. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they called it.
Never had to wear that thing, but it's big,
It's
puffy.
it's it's warm. I'll just put
Yeah.
it that way.
I mean,
Yeah.
I had one, never took it out of the bag. Brand new, just kept it in the bag, kept it in my locker, never had to use it. Because for us, even though I'm up north, it gets cold. For us, we never trained during the winter. We did admin stuff during the winter, and we just never needed it. Waffle Top usually covered it. At worst, we'd wear a fleece, but infantry they don't really like the fleece too much. And there's always the controversy: does the fleece go on the outside? Does the fleece go on the inside?
Right. Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion on its own.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it goes on the outside. I'm pretty sure someone actually found an actual
It's an outer
TM.
layer.
Yeah, that it's an outer, and it makes sense too because if it's an inner, well, I don't know. We're not gonna get into it. Doesn't matter. But
Yeah, yeah.
it gets
It's like
weird because if it gets wet, it's useless. We're not supposed to wear it when it's wet. I don't know.
yeah,
But yeah, it's funny that when you brought that up because that's all I could think about. Because personally, people will talk about it's the lowest bidder or blah blah all that crap. But it's not. The ECW, whatever. The cold weather gear is amazing. Our sleeping gear is amazing. The modular sleep system.
yeah.
I think yeah,
Modular sleep system. Yeah,
amazing, fantastic.
yeah, yeah. Where I work at Tenier, we have our own version of the MSS, and which we're working on, getting that out. And it's a multi-part. We have a 4-part and a 7-part system.
Ooh,
Um, yeah, yeah. It's very extensive. I'm still me being in the sales department. I'm still looking into that whole thing. I wasn't really familiar with the sleep systems before. Mostly, I worked on a line job where we made the jackets and trousers and stuff. For the cold weather gear.
yeah,
So
that
we're
and the
doing
whoopee.
that. So
It's. I mean, pretty much all you need is a waffle top, a wet weather top, maybe wet weather bottoms, but and then a whoopee, and you're pretty much covered out in the field. Maybe a poncho.
definitely,
And I
yeah,
do call them whoobies. I don't care what the Marines say. We call them whoobies in the Army, and wherever that came from, who knows. But yeah, so that's something that's really fascinating because again, like I said, I that's a system that I think you look back. I got a pair of like 1980s issue, but it was the green wet weather top and bottom, that really crappy rubber. Damn thing ripped when I was like taking it out of the original packaging. It just ripped right down a seam,
wow,
and I was like, "Oh, this is great." And It's when I did that post on the guys in Desert Storm wearing it, well, Desert Shield technically, wearing it and stuff for training purposes and stuff, and because people always had questions on that, I finally found something that detailed why it was worn that way, and I'm like, oh man, I can't imagine even fighting in this because not only did it rip on me, it was loud as hell. It just made so much noise. You're in a foxhole, and it's raining, and you're wearing that thing. All the enemy knows where you are because you just move an
moving
arm.
around.
Yeah, you're done. And I was like, this sucks.
And that brings us something that pops in my mind that this could be a whole nother discussion on its own again. But Velcro, the practicality of Velcro with military uniforms and gear.
Yeah,
that you could
buttons are
somebody could argue.
superior.
Yeah, definitely, I agree.
Yeah.
I think Velcro's stupid. Velcro's stupid, but it's used on everything. Yeah,
You're preaching to the
I
choir on
agree.
that one. I can tell you a lot of guys don't like the Velcro because it makes noise, so you can't do anything with it.
And and for example, like the combat uniforms, like, I mean, do you really need Velcro on your sleeves to change? Like, how often are you changing out?
Hey, that's very convenient. When we did I actually changed patches 3 times when I was in.
Oh, okay. All
But
right. So, okay.
but that was just because for some reason my unit went from being, and it sucked too because we were Yankee Division for the first couple years that I was in, which has a crap ton of history behind it. I love the Yankee Division, and then we went to what we called the Wonder Woman shield because it was a new unit, it was a new shield, it was a new patch and everything. It was just like red, white, blue, just a shield thing. And then we eventually went back. We went to the 44th, which at least that has history going back to World War II. But that's a New Jersey Guard unit because my unit, for some reason, ended up falling under control of the New Jersey Guard in terms of like brigade structure. It gets really weird. We did a lot of our training in New Jersey because Fort Dix has the best ranges for us as far as in that region.
Wow. Okay.
So, but yeah, it's funny because we all, you get Velcro dirty. Oh my God, it does not come out. You get sand, dirt, anything in that, it's just stuck in there forever.
It wears out.
Yeah.
It wears out after a while.
You can't do anything with it. The old ACUs with the flip up top, it had the Velcro and you flipped it up and stuff, and you had a pocket. The minute you open that, it just Velcro noise, so you couldn't open it whenever.
I think behind me here, I actually have a
combat shirt.
Combat shirt. I got this at a thrift store for like $5, and if I can look, I mean, Velcro. It's on that side, and then I believe this side has a zipper pocket.
So that's that's exactly how the new OCP ACUs are, and yes, they are
this
ACUs.
One's got the
IR tab.
Got the friend info tab. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly how it is on the modern issue, and that I will say I'm not a fan of the zipper either because the zipper, you have to pull the sleeve down to get the zipper. The zipper gets stuck.
Right, it'll get bunched up. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like, all right, Natick, come on, man, what are you doing over there, Natick? Let's get this ball rolling because, like, it's one of those weird things where we were all excited to get the new uniforms because, I'm sorry, but UCP sucked. Like,
I think that's pretty universal that UP.
universal. Don't get me wrong, I could see it in some instances being good, but like when we switched and slowly, and the thing that sucked for us was that National Guard, even though my unit was well funded and we got good stuff, the money went to stuff like we got the 50 cal upgrades, we got the M2A1, we got the 320 grenade launchers, we got rid of our 203s long before I got there, and we had 240
the transition period for National Guard versus active duty.
Yeah,
that's been
we spent our budget on Crows, remote weapon systems for the Humvees, and we still use Humvees, and on the weapon systems themselves. Instead of buying we didn't get body armor, we just had our Flicks or FLC or whatever you want to call it. We call it Flicks. But it was always in UCP. So our rucks were in UCP, our Flicks, our helmet covers were in UCP. Some guys got the multicam helmet covers, so they kind of looked better. Some guys got the new OCP helmet cam. So we had this mixed matched, some guys were UCP, and then because UCP had a cutoff date for a while there was just some guys are like, I'm not wearing my new uniforms. They're just like, I'm just gonna wear my old ones till they fall apart and I'm
wear out. Yeah.
And then it was just bad.
Anybody that knows anything about that is the active versus National Guard, the transition period as far with uniforms is a good example. Uniforms and gear, and throughout history,
Yep.
particularly the 21st century or 21st century, the 20th century. Now, I mean, you can really see it. Like, for example, during the Vietnam War era, the 1960s. Even though that, for example, subdued insignia, the tapes and shoulder sleeve insignias, that stuff. They implemented a date where that stuff's supposed to be subdued, but you still had the National Guard guys back home, or stateside guys still, wearing the
Full color,
colored,
yeah.
yeah, full color tapes and stuff, and the older uniforms. So, and some older gear and weapons. Obviously, like the M1 rifle, that thing was used like the 70s in
Yep.
National Guard inventories. As far as I've read, for example. So, I mean, that's just how the ball rolls on that, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say it too, because I was just, what was the Army thinking with the colored everything? I don't understand the ranks and the
in the
uniform, all that
in
stuff.
in the 1950s, the U.S. Army, with the advancement of nuclear weapons and stuff, priority was slowly going away from the Army. Everything was
Oh,
going
okay, yeah,
more
fair.
towards the Air Force. As far as nuclear capabilities were concerned, because the military thought at that time that wars would just be fought with nuclear weapons. That's just what they anticipated. So there was not as much focus. So with the Army, they wanted a more professional look, I guess. A spit and shine,
Yeah,
look,
I can see that,
and
yeah.
and that led to things being implemented that weren't so practical. Like the colored name tapes, for example. I
I
mean,
know.
you could probably get
Black
spotted
on
a mile
white.
away.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, and the gold on black, U.S. Army, name
Yeah,
tapes.
that
Like,
one's just
it
as bad.
looks, it looks. Don't get me wrong, it looks cool.
Yeah, gold on
As
black,
far
Army's colors, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it looks awesome. But as
Yeah.
far as like a practical purpose, yeah, it sucks. And you could say that about the just another small thing is the something as simple as your cap, your field cap. The Army, they had the kepi style Ridgeway caps that they used
Yep.
from, I really want to say towards the end of the Korean War till, the early 60s, when it was replaced by the not so favorable hot weather field cap, the OG 106 or
Yeah, the more
107,
baseball
whatever you want
cap
to.
look, yeah.
Me, I mean, it's they just didn't think it was a professional looking hat. Just a
Yeah.
baseball hat. But when they implemented, they thought this would be a more practical hat than the patrol, kepi style. So that is just something. It's just an example, I guess. Just why things get changed.
Well, the Army's always had a problem with, like I said, with the beret, even the modern PC, the patrol cap, not really a big fan of it. I kinda wish boonies would take over, but boonies can look bad, but boonies are just more practical as a
Practical,
yeah, because they
and
give you
they
coverage.
right, and that's where they found their practicalness in Vietnam.
Exactly,
Widespread
yeah.
use in Vietnam because it was a more practical hat than the baseball cap.
Yeah, and
So,
and the patrol cap, like, it's just I mean, like, the hat that's right here, that's one of those, cold weather patrol caps from, like, the '80s. It's
okay.
actually my dad's hat. It's got the earmuffs. It's got the
Yeah,
felt line, and you
you have
pull it down.
you have the cold weather version that has the ear flaps that fold down. Then you have the
Yeah.
hot weather version that's usually made of like a rip stop or something. But I don't think those came around till later.
Yeah, and it's just, like, cool concept. Functionally, though, kind
Not
of
so great.
weird. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it's warm, I'll give it that, but it's kind of uncomfortable to wear over time and stuff, and I'm not really sure
and
if they were
and
thinking that through.
well, myself not ever being a member of the army or anything like that, but I've from what I've seen is there's a wall and there's people that as far as uniforms and gear go, it's sharpness and how it looks, the appearance versus practicality.
Yeah.
And these two things just like butt heads as far as things go from what
Oh,
I've
that's for
from what
sure.
I've seen.
I mean, the UCP is
Like,
a perfect example of that. I think they were thinking this looks like a modern professional military, and
yeah, this is 21st century,
we're so ahead of the
cyber.
game. Everyone's gonna do this.
I mean, it might just be me, but like Modern Warfare 2, for example, that just what sold it to me. I was like, man, UCP, this is cool,
Oh
man.
yeah,
This is
yeah,
yeah, this is the modern, this is the modern army, kind of thing. And then later on, I was like, when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, that was a terrible camouflage pattern. Like the whole point of camouflage is to give you some kind of at least concealment, and you're not going to get concealment with that in most environments. So
Oh my god, you should have seen when we trained. We were out in the woods and stuff, the forest, and it was just like
with
uh,
UCP,
there's a bunch of gray dudes just hanging around and
running
stuff. It's like,
around
all right, they're gonna be
in the
setting up an
green woods,
ambush. You can't see them. It's
he's
like,
right there.
yeah, yeah,
He's
it's
right
like
there.
just put leaves on. You'll be good. You know,
It's
it's
I've seen videos where people actually, because I mean, you can find UCP for like basically pennies now.
oh
You know,
yeah,
you know how the whole surplus thing works. So,
oh it's
you
get it
know,
while you can,
I've
because
seen where
30 years from now, like 15-year-olds gonna be like, UCP is so cool, it's so
UCP
rare.
was a cool, right? Yeah. So it's gonna. I've seen videos where people have actually made it a practical camouflage by just simply dyeing it.
Yeah.
Dyeing a green color and actually makes a pretty decent homemade camouflage.
It makes sense too, because it's based on CAD-PAT, which is just, I mean, the whole digital line for both MARPAT and UCP was based on CAD-PAT. And I'm not going to give the Canadians the any sort of credit on this because dual text existed in the 80s, or the late 70s. We actually experimented with dual text as a uniform pattern, and it never went anywhere. Dual text was like not even close to modern digital. It was very blocky, very, very. The pattern was a lot worse than it is. It wasn't as figured out and stuff. But everyone always say that. It drives me nuts. That's why I had to say because people go CAD-PAD. Canadians did it first. I'm like, dual text exists, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
don't give.
that's like with the ERDL. It was developed in
Yes.
like 1948, and
Yep.
it wasn't used until Vietnam 20 something years later. And going back to back to the 107s, ERDL saw use late war use, with the Army and the Marines in particular
Yeah.
before
Marines
they
like
were
their
withdrawn.
EODL. Yeah.
Yeah, they did, but the Army didn't stick with it. Once the war was over, it's like, no, we're going back to our 107s, and then
Yeah.
then about a 10-year span, then you have this thing called the M81 Woodland
Ooh, the
comes
glorious
along. Wonderful.
M81.
Oh, yes, yeah, all time. For the longest time when I was younger, I just thought, man, this is just like a cliche package. Commercial copied it.
It definitely became
Commercial.
the cliche woodland like
Yeah, it did.
camouflage. Yeah.
But slowly through my reenacting and collecting obsession, it's like I've come to appreciate it. The M81, just how of a classic and awesome pattern it is. As far as effectiveness, I don't know.
I mean, it is effective. The problem for M81 is through night scopes, through night vision. It loses its effectiveness at night because it just it's the material choice, the color choice. I don't know how it works because I'm not an expert in uniform camouflage development, but something to go along with that. That's why UCP was chosen partially was because of its effectiveness underneath night optics.
Okay.
And we were thinking, oh, near peer, and then we went and invaded Iraq, so that went out the window. But like
Yeah.
that was the planning, I guess. At least that's what they say. Whether or not that's true or not, I mean, these decisions, especially in the early 2000s, decisions being made were like, whew.
Very questionable.
Yeah,
Very questionable.
very questionable.
A lot of hokey stuff happened around that time, and now people are scratching their heads about it. It's like, why did this happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I always tell it's funny because when people talk to me about like they ask me about military budgets and stuff, and I'm like, you can cut the military budget. We're not going to get into politics, but it's a side thing. Well, you can cut the military budget, but all it does is it just cuts funding to the troops. They never
Yeah,
actually cut any big programs. You cut the military budget, F-35 still get made. And I don't have personally have a problem with the F-35, but from
a
my
lot of
understanding,
money.
yeah, it's a lot of money. But from my understanding, it is a good fighter. But we'll see. Um,
God,
I
only time
mean,
will tell with something like that.
because people will be like, "Oh, you got to keep, F-15s were so great. You can't keep flying F-15s, and they're not
Same
that
platform.
cheap to make."
What was it like the 70s when the F-15 was introduced? How long has that been? Like 50 years ago?
Yeah, and
40,
we've
50
had
years ago?
issues where Air National Guard F-15s have fallen out of the sky and it's the same thing with Blackhawks, where Blackhawks are getting to the point where their airframes are the same ones built in the
So
80s,
old.
and they're starting to have stress fractures and fatigue on the airframe,
So
and
it gets to a certain point that you
you
have
have
to
to
move
upgrade.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
and
have to upgrade.
and it's fair. And I get, I think people get an attachment to stuff. Like I personally, I love the Huey. I think most people do. The Huey's a great aircraft for
Yeah,
the time, but it fell behind in the curve. That's why you have stuff like the twin Huey, the Super Huey, um, and they're different airframes. I mean, they're the same lineage, I guess, but the twin Huey,
right.
the UH-1N that the Marines used up until recently, and they've replaced it with the what is it, the Venom. Um,
Don't like that.
but yeah, that it's a new airframe. It's you have to keep refreshing this stuff, otherwise, these things start to. I mean, there's exceptions to that rule. Abrams, we basically have an infinite number of Abrams sitting in stock somewhere
Pretty
because
much, yeah,
we
yeah.
we built like 4,000 of the original Abrams, and they have a different turret, so they would need new turrets, but they basically just need to be upgraded to become the newer standard. It would be a lot of money probably to do that,
Are
but they
they
do
eventually
exist.
upgrade? Are they eventually upgrading to A3 version? I've
We'll
seen
see.
I've seen some yeah I've seen some stuff getting tossed around about that whether there's going to be an A3 version or not.
Well, it's kind of like I feel like the Army went the Windows, even though Microsoft's already thrown this out, but they went the Windows 10 route, where Windows 10 was supposed to be the end all be all Windows program,
To
or
everything. Yeah,
yeah, and then they're like, we're just gonna keep upgrading and upgrading, and they're like, oh wait, by the way, we're coming out Windows 11, so that plan
yeah.
got scrapped. But the Army kind of is doing that because they're like, all right, we got the M1A2, okay, Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, now Step 4. When's the A3 coming? We'll see. And it gets
We'll
to a
see.
point
Yeah,
to where, from what I can tell, they're just going to scrap the whole line and just go with a new tank. They already have a development plan.
just a all altogether new platform
Yeah, and it's probably going to be, if I remember correctly, I think it was the 2040s is what they're aiming for, because at the
to
moment the
replace.
Abrams does a good enough job that they think. I mean, we're still flying B-52s, so I mean,
And they're scheduled to fly to what the 2040s.
yeah, potentially long. I think that's crazy. I think it's
That
crazy that
it
multiple
that's
generations.
insane.
Like your great grandfather could be flying one, and then
And aircraft, yeah, aircraft design and probably, which obviously they do retrofits and rehauls or overhauls of aircraft, but a platform from the 1950s is
yeah,
still being used today. It's insane to think about it like that.
and we would have a ton of them if we didn't go to war with Vietnam. I mean, we lost so many in Vietnam. I don't think we've built a new B-52 since I think the '60s. So
Since the 60s, yeah,
yeah,
I
so
don't think
it's
there's been any
like,
new airframes built since then.
and it's crazy to think that the
Whatever.
B-52 was more close air support than it was actually bombing the North during Vietnam. I always find that fact to be interesting. I just can't
Yeah,
imagine. I can't imagine.
it's wild. Yeah, it's wild.
But yeah, we've completely gone.
Way off.
But I think that's fine because I think that's interesting. I think that's fun. Um,
Yeah, I'll try to keep it on topic for you.
but you can always come back on and we can just blabber longer. We're basically the same person. I've just realized that we could probably talk on this for like 6 hours, and
I'm sure nobody would want to go through 6 hours of us going on about this.
hey, people listen to Joe Rogan and he does like 3 hour long podcasts.
Good point.
All
Good
right,
point.
fair enough. I'm
Yeah,
not Joe Rogan, so I mean, but I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
they good.
So I think we are going to end it though, because we were at 53 minutes, and I think that's.
Wow, it's been going on that long. That's okay.
Yeah, we've been doing good. We're in my where I like to aim for length. So, it was
Awesome.
a pleasure to have you on, man. Like this has been a really fun conversation. Like,
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's been pretty good. I don't get to talk to a lot of people about this, like a particular subject matter like this that I'm interested in. When I talk to anybody else about it, like it's just base level or they don't know anything, so I have to explain it to them. So
yeah,
it's good to talk to somebody that has at least some kind of understanding,
I
of
feel
how
that.
these things work. So yeah,
Yeah. Like I said, and you were I like we talked about this before, but you were top of my list of guests to have on because you know I again I can't say it enough. I think your Instagram should be more popular than it is. It's kind of
I'm honestly I'm happy where I'm at. It's as long as there's somebody out there that enjoys it. I'm just glad to be a part of it. And it's not just me; it's a community of people. People put a lot of work and dedication into that. Something that's considered a hobby, and I appreciate that a lot. And I like being a part of something like that that people have a lot of joy in doing. So
yeah, for all the
that's
negatives that our community, the communities, I should say, because it kind of spans multiple communities. There is something about it that I think just it's a draw to do it. It's fun, it's interesting. You get the history, you get the people. You can you can toss ideas around, and if you don't know something, you can ask a question, and someone will probably have an answer, and there's so many different things happening at once that you're able to like just I don't know. It's just it's so much. It's their community's good for the most part, and I think that's important. But
for the most part, like you always have your bad eggs, but for the most part, it's something I really enjoy doing. So, um,
yeah, it's awesome, and I'm glad you're doing it because, like I said, you bring a really good perspective on things because your impressions, your
I,
reenacting, it's really good.
I just see something and it's a rabbit hole. I focus on it till I get it done. I can't explain it. There's so much more I could say about it, but like you said, went on long enough about this thing. But
Like I
yeah,
said, you can always come back on again.
I can always come back.
Yeah,
That is true. I can always come back.
or we can turn this into a separate show. I'm fine with that too.
I'm good for anything. Honestly,
Well,
I've had a lot of fun doing this.
we'll see because I thought about that a second ago. I'm like, that's not a bad idea. A completely separate show talking about stuff completely different because I think that
Yeah,
could be a thing.
right. We just. I'm sure you had. I'm sure you had topics to go by, but like you get me started on a tangent. Like we can talk about a certain thing for forever. Like I can go on about stuff forever. That's how obsessed I am with this stuff.
Yeah, you're telling me it's a problem. Um, but all right, so anyone who wants to find you, where do they find you?
The GI Jones, the underscore GI Jones on Instagram.
And I
That's
will
where you can find me.
link it in the description on YouTube. And I don't know how well links work on the podcast formats, but I'll link it so people can find it.
Awesome.
And I think that's it. So, like I said, thanks for coming on, man. This has been extremely fun, good conversation.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's been a lot of fun.
And with that, we'll say goodbye.
All right, man.